So actually all this discussion about the budget and so on and so forth is at the basic input stage. You know? And really what happens after, and is focusing even more on just the spending of the money. Spending, just the expenditure. The budget even has two broad sides to revenue, expenditure, plus policies and other things that you can do. Now, you add certain processes like Federal Executive Council meeting, due process, National Assembly, and so on and so forth. A lot of other activities like conferences, meetings, seminars. We do a lot of that in government. I'm sure you know that. Trips, foreign and domestic, we do a lot of them. You produce outputs with all of that. What are the kind of outputs? Fertilizer. You hear, Nigerians hear that so many tons of fertilizer have been imported and delivered. So many dams have been built. Whether the water is getting to the people is a different matter. This is output. GSM, we have 4 GSM providers. What kind of service are they delivering? Telephone lines, number of immigration centers, number of houses constructed. All these are outputs. Power stations built. We tell stories about, we build so many power stations, we have so many kilometers of transmission lines, number of classrooms built, number of hospitals, schools, and so on and so forth. All these output. But the critical thing for the average Nigerian is really the outcomes. If you have 11 power stations, 20 power, most Nigerians really don't care. What they are interested in is how many hours of uninterrupted power supply do they get a day. If the power goes, how long does it take to restore? If they have a problem in their house and they go to PHCN and report, how long does it take to get addressed? In education, not the number of schools, number of classrooms, are neither here nor there. It's important. But what really is important when we sat down with the Minister of Education is to say what Nigerians care for and the service that you are delivering, the key things are the quality of that education and the access.
Outcome is so important here. If we look at all of them and going through all of this, they say the performance contracting model started with France in 1970, and most countries have used it successfully for the past 15 years, meaning Nigeria dabbling into all of that wouldn't be any problem. We must have seen the pros and the cons, and by now you should be able to let us know how effective this particular module is for us, for you to have adopted, or for the government to have adopted it for the ministers.
Well, I think you see, you are quite right. It started essentially in France in the 70s, but of recent it has been, the last sort of 10-15 years, been used much more widely and in a way of addressing delivery and quality of service more widely by a number of countries. Britain, South Africa, Malaysia, Indonesia, these are some of the leading countries. And quite interestingly, just to prove to people that we are not talking of something out of the skies, I have brought an example of the annual report, 2 annual reports of the Ministries of Defense of South Africa and the Ministry of Defense of the UK. That is 2010-2011 reports. This is the annual report of the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom. The bigger one is the annual report of the Ministry of Defense of South Africa.
What's the connection?
The connection is this. Most people, when you say defense, national security. You cannot disclose what is happening with defense, isn't it? If I had brought the report of Ministry of Works, Ministry of Transport, you say, okay, that's understandable. But defense, people, you see, government sometimes tends to be so opaque. And unfortunately, until now, this is why a minister said what the president is doing is really revolutionary. Because government has tended to be very opaque. The citizen doesn't know what is happening. So I brought defense because when you say defense and government say we are not going to tell you what we are doing in defense, most people will even accept that. But you go through this and see they are giving details. For example, the UK Ministry of Defense about their troop deployments in Afghanistan, the cost per head of troop deployments all over the world. There are targets that have been set for the minister and what he has achieved and what he hasn't achieved. And this is produced on an annual basis and taken first of all obviously to the Prime Minister and ultimately to Parliament and then released. Now the other interesting thing about these two reports is you would think that I use diplomatic channels to get it. I downloaded them from the internet. So again, the purpose of this performance contract is first of all accountability, delivery of results, because you have to prove to the people that put you there either.
Perhaps if you allow me come in here, because it's very key. I remember it was my colleague Mark Bashir was asking if we've seen a model of the performance contract, asking so many other questions. For instance, what you have signed before the president, what we expect of you as the Minister of National Planning, same with other ministers. And you go online, you check, you don't get to see any of such. But now you just told us that you got this, and that means it's not shrouded in secrecy. But for Nigeria, how come till this moment you hardly get information like this?
Well, it is, again, for Nigeria, that's the point I'm making. It's not shrouded in secrecy. When we produce the first annual report, this is it, Monitoring and Performance Evaluation Report for Federal Ministries, Departments and Agencies for the year 2010. You see, we are not in 2011 yet. They are in Britain and South Africa. Their year end is March. So our year end is December. But I came to Lagos here just because I didn't even want to stay in Abuja and do it. I came to Lagos, called the press, launched it publicly. So, and this is available on the National Planning Commission website today. You can go up there and see. So it's not, again, it's not shrouded in mystery, and it's not something that started just because the National Assembly has put pressure on the president. I think it's very important to understand that. But also to make the point that this debate about budget performance, unfortunately, it's been a bit of even a digression.
How?
In the sense that, from this chart that I have shown you, the budget, when we are measuring budget performance, it's the basic, it's a very crude measure of performance. It's the basic starting point. So when really you are only harping on inputs. If that money is spent, what was it used for? We have today in this country, I know, dams that are 30 years old with a large amount of water sitting in those dams. Is not being used for irrigation, is not being used for water supply. So we've spent the money, we are not getting the benefit. Over 6,000 uncompleted projects. These are not serving the Nigerian people. So really, what we should, that's why this whole performance tracking that focuses on outcomes is really what Nigerians should. And I think they should really, it's a revolution. The president needs to be highly commended because it's the first time that this is being done in Nigeria.